back to the Denman Homestead. Stephanie Denman here. Today I'm canning, and even though it's a little hot outside and I typically don't like to get all this out during the summer if I can help it, or the hottest parts of the month or whatever, you might have seen or maybe not have seen, I just processed some of our roosters, and I don't want to let any of that go to waste. So although I've broken down the rooster and we've been able to enjoy a meal or two out of it, I still have some bones left over that I made a chicken stock with. So I want to can that chicken stock so that it's shelf stable for years to come. So just a quick kind of explanation, when you talk about stocks and broths, there is a difference, but a lot of times people use them interchangeably. A chicken broth is primarily the water used after you've basically boiled a whole chicken or a chicken with a lot of meat on it, and a stock is normally the juices and the water left over after you have rendered down just basically bones. So I took the carcass of 4 of our roosters, and one of them I actually boiled whole, the whole rooster, so that was going to be more of a broth, and the others I have just used just the bones after I had broken down all the meat off of it, and I put that separately, those pieces of meat into a brine, which I'll show you in just a little bit about how I do that brine. But let me show you what I'm working with right now with the stock. So I just let this cook overnight in my crock pot, pretty much. I poured water over these bones here. I added in some of my dehydrated lemon slices, like a quarter of an onion. I didn't really add in a whole lot of extras, just a little bit to give it a little bit of an extra flavor. I didn't add in any spices or anything like that. So this is just the chicken, little leftover meat on the bone, and then a few, onions, like I said, and some lemon pieces. I have my chicken broth in this pot, and this just had the whole chicken in it that I ended up boiling in this water. So I'll probably end up combining the 2 waters together just to mix it so they're both equally flavorful. And then what I've got going on here in this black pot is I have my jars, some quart and pint jars, simmering in this water, heating up. And then here I've got my 23 quart Presto pressure canner. Say that 3 times fast. I've got my pressure canner here heating up with just a little bit of water on the bottom, about 2 inches of water, and then I added in a splash of white vinegar to my water here because we're on well water, and when you pressure can or even water bath with well water, sometimes you get that cloudiness to your jar, and it's just the mineral buildup on the outside of the jar. The splash of vinegar in your water really helps that mineral deposit not stick to your jar, so it's not like cloudy looking on the jar. You can skip that step if you want. I just do it because I don't like that film look on my jars. So what I need to do now is take this and strain it all off. I'm going to get a fine mesh strainer, strain it all off, combine the 2 liquids, and then we're going to take our jars out of the hot water, ladle them into the jars, leaving about an inch head space. I've got my lids and my rings, and then we're going to put them in this pressure canner. Now, pints for sea level just need about 20 minutes to pressure cook. Quarts need about 25. So if you've got a mixture of both types of jars, then go ahead and go with the higher pressure cooker time for the larger jar. So we're gonna do this for 25 minutes in this pressure cooker. So let's just get into it. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start by just removing some of these bones here to make it a little bit easier to strain. Got the larger bones and everything removed from the stock, so I'm just gonna strain this now into my bowl here and get just the liquid. Give the bones to my dogs because cooked chicken bones can really choke them, hurt them. So, but any leftover chicken pieces I am going to give them. I'm going to go ahead and add in my chicken broth from last night as well. Look at that. Doesn't that look good? That is a lot of chicken soup. It just smells like fresh and comforting. Something about chicken broth. Okay, so I'm going to take my hot jars and I'm going to empty out the water that's inside of them. This pot right here, my actual canner pot, the water is starting to steam, which is good because you don't want to put hot jars into cold water because then they'll crack. So you want to go from hot to hot. There is such a thing as called cold packing or cold processing. That's where you start off with cool or room temperature water, but we're gonna do a hot process, so we're gonna need hot water for these, or hot jars anyway. You're gonna want your liquid to be, whatever goes inside them, hot. Or at least warm, not cold where it will crack the jar. To make this easier on myself, I'm going to pour my broth into this so that I can easily pour into my jars. You can add salt to your broth if you want to. It's not mandatory. Some people like salted broth. I'm just going to leave it unsalted just in case. A recipe in the future calls for low sodium or something like that. And I don't know exactly how many jars I'm going to need, so I just went ahead and made, boiled as many as that would fit in the pot. I'd rather sterilize too many than too few. Last jar didn't fill up quite as much as the others, so I went ahead and topped it off with some warm water. I'm not concerned about the flavor of this one, like it being watered down, because towards the end of pouring off all that stock into each jar, there was kind of a layer of what I would call sediment, which is just some of those chicken pieces and chicken bits that didn't get strained fully from the fine mesh strainer. So if this is pressure cooked in the canner, just that extra little bit of stuff that's in there is going to help give it that flavor. It's not going to be watered down too much. So I am going to go ahead and I'm going to clean each one of these jars, the lids. Just going to run my paper towel, making sure there's no extra oils or water or anything that collected on the lid, just so that that top gets a really good seal on the jar. And then I'm going to put them in my pressure canner. kind of show you what I mean. So you're just gonna put your lid on, give it a spin until you just can't do this anymore, and then kind of just give it a little bit of a turn. Just make sure it's snug on there. What that's doing, it's helping that wax seal put pressure, or that rubber seal, put pressure down on the jar to help it get that seal and suction whenever it's in the pressure canner. Okay. We've got a boil going in here. Let's go ahead and add our jars. So here you can see they're all spaced out evenly. They're not touching one another. It's starting to fog up here. You don't want them to touch one another, otherwise they may rattle and then crack and break whenever they hit each other if they end up rattling too much. So just give them a little bit of space, don't overcrowd them. Sorry if there's a lot of background noise going on right now. I've got my bread maker going over there. So we are going to put this on here and we're going to just secure this lid. Okay, we're not going to start the timer yet for that 25 minutes, okay? 25 minutes, the timer starts whenever we come to pressure. In order to get to pressure, we need this pot to heat up. This spout right here, is going to start steaming, okay? It's going to help allow it to heat and build pressure. We're going to set a timer for 10 minutes once this has a steady stream of steam. Okay, we want to see this be just steaming away for 10 minutes. At that time, this pressure gauge is going to stay at 0 because there's nothing building the pressure just yet. Okay. After the 10 minutes is up of this steaming, we're going to add our weight or our jiggler on there. Okay. Then, once the weight is holding down the steam inside the pot, the steam is no longer able to release, we're going to watch this pressure gauge get to 10. Once it gets to 10, we're going to turn down the heat a little bit so that it stays at 10 pounds per pressure, 10 pounds PSI. And then we're going to set our timer for 25 minutes to cook under pressure for 25 minutes. So there's a process to get there. It's not just like, oh, start the timer for 25 minutes. It's a little bit more than that. So I will show you when this comes, when this starts steaming, and take it step by step. Okay. So let me see if I can get it to where you can see the steam. You can kind of see it on my microwave better because it's got like a black background. We've got a steady stream of that steam coming up. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer for 10 minutes. Okay, and you notice that this little plug here, it popped up. So that's normal and that's good. It's just showing that there's pressure building, but this gauge is not going to start to turn because this is letting out the steam at the moment. So this is just building temperature and heat at the moment, not necessarily increasing in pressure. While this is rattling away and building pressure, let me go ahead and tell you a little bit about the brine that I use to basically soak my chicken to get it to tenderize. Okay, so in this bag, in the Ziploc bag, I've got all sorts of chicken pieces that I broke down off of our roosters. So we've got the thighs and the drumsticks and the breasts and the tenderloins. And in this brine here, we've got a whole mixture of herbs, spices, and a salt water solution. So my basic brine recipe isn't anything like written down technically. I just kind of taste it. Just think of like the ocean water or just a salt water base. All you need for brine is salt and water. Everything else is just extra. whatever you want to kind of infuse flavor into the chicken with, that's just extra stuff. But the salt and the water, you really need to hold in moisture, lock in moisture into the chicken. So it's also going to increase moisture when you cook it, and it's going to tenderize that meat. So especially with roosters, roosters can tend to be tough and stringy, depending on how old the bird is and things like that. So using a brine with the rooster is especially helpful to help break that down and tenderize the meat better. Mine, I have parsley, basil, rosemary, red chili pepper flakes. I put a few slices of those dehydrated lemons in there with it. What else did I do? Some minced onion, a little bit of garlic powder, just kind of threw the whole pot, you know, the whole kitchen in there, stuff that I enjoy cooking chicken with. And then I mixed it in with the salt water solution on the stove. And I let it cook down a little bit to dissolve the salt. I didn't necessarily bring it to a boil so much, just simmer. And then I put everything, and then I added some cool water to cool down the brine. And then I added everything to that Ziploc bag, and I popped it in the refrigerator, and it's been in there for about a day. So you can leave it in there for 24, 48 hours, and then cook it and try it out and see how you like it. Okay, timer's about to go off. I'm going to take my weight and I'm going to put it right on top of this. Okay? And before we do the timer again, we're going to have this pressure start to build, this gauge start to climb. And between the 5 and 10 mark, that's when I'm going to start to adjust the heat, because right now it's on full-blown high heat. And if I keep it on that high heat, then it's going to go well past the 10 pounds pressure mark. So right between the 5 and 10, that's when I'm going to start to dial back the heat, where it will still continue to rise, but not go past the 10 so much. If it does go past the 10 by a number or two, that's okay. You're just going to want to keep an eye on that temperature to make sure it's not going to get dangerously high in pressure. I'll show you the gauge. It's climbing now. See how fast that is? Something to note while we wait for this gauge to climb is just double check your altitude when you're canning, when you're pressure canning, because depending on where you are relative to sea level and the mountains, there are different weights that you need for different altitudes. So the higher the altitude, the heavier weight you need. So you'll need to add in a little bit more weight, and they make specialized gauges for those altitudes so that your pressure is not off. Okay, so we're about halfway there, so I'm going to go ahead and turn the temperature down some. It's going to continue to climb. Just going to keep an eye on it, because as you turn the temperature down, it should start to level out. And once it reaches 10, that's when you start your timer for 25 minutes. All right, we're at the 10 mark. Ooh. We're at that 10 mark now. So now's the time to set the timer for 25 minutes. Don't walk away though. You're going to need to keep an eye on this to make sure that the pressure doesn't go crazy or start to dip, or just stay in the general vicinity and peek on it every couple minutes. Okay, welcome back. Timer just went off. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my heat all the way down, and carefully, I'm just going to move this off the heat. You don't have to do this step, but it just helps the pot come down in temperature quicker. Just going to slide it off the heat, off the stove. And I'm not going to remove this yet, this little bobber. A little weight. Not going to remove that yet. I'm going to let this naturally come down in pressure to 0, and then I'll take this off. Once it's all come down to 0, and this little top right here this little doohickey. You see it right here? This guy? Once that has sunk back down and it's no longer propped up, that means that there's no longer pressure within the canner and I can safely remove the lid. Now remember, when you take the lid off, try to remember to take the lid off away from you to let the steam escape, because if you take it off and you look in, you're gonna get a facial that's gonna hurt. So, already the gauge is already starting to slowly lose pressure. It's not gonna take too long, but I will come back to you whenever we take the lid off. Okay, so it's already down to 0. It's been down to 0 for a little bit now, so I'm gonna go ahead and take this off, this little bobble here. There might be some steam that comes out here. This little top just fell in. So we are good to remove the lid. Now remember, it's going to be very, very hot still. I can still hear bubbling going on in here. So I'm going to take it away from me. Show you down in here. Ooh, steamy. Okay, it looks good. Everything is still intact. And do you see these bubbles inside the jar? They're going to continue to do that for several hours on the counter. I'm going to get my little grabbers going, get these out of here and put them on a cloth on my counter, and I'm going to let them sit here for at least a day, like overnight for sure. 24 hours is preferable so that the seal gets a really good opportunity to just be undisturbed and seal completely. So let's get them out. You not recording? I am. Oh, what are you doing? Oh. Alright. So you see some of this has some like floaties in the bottom, and that's okay. That's just part of the chicken, like the leftover chicken bits. It's not going to hurt anything because we've actually cooked this in the pressure canner. So if you've got a little bit of chicken in there, that's okay. You don't have to use that. You can strain it off whenever you get ready to use your broth. But look how golden and pretty this is. Like, it's really beautiful broth, and it's all natural, organic. You made it yourself, canned it yourself, and it'll last for a long, long time. It's shelf stable for at least a year. Or more. So what you want to do is you just want to make sure that your lids seal. You can already start to hear some of them popping, but tomorrow when you wake up or whenever it's been 24 hours, like this one right here has already started to seal down. It's already sucked down. So that's a good sign that that one's going to be sealed. But over time you may hear some popping noises, and that's just the sealing, the jar sealing completely. So yeah, that's canning chicken broth. Whether it's just a chicken that you get at the store and you boil it down and you want to save that extra broth for the future, you can freeze it, surely. But if you want to give it a longer shelf life and get stuff out of your freezer, definitely can it if you have a pressure canner and you're able to. It's pretty cool to have those in the pantry waiting for you. So, thank you so much for joining me on this one, and we'll catch you on the next one. Bye.